to be talking about some more specific cell organelles. We're going to be on page 24 of our notes, and we're still in section 2.1. So we're talking about cell structure. Just as a brief review, remember that all cells, prokaryotic like our bacteria, or eukaryotic like our plants, animals, protists, and fungi, all have four main parts to them. So remember that all cells have that exterior structure, which was the cell membrane. All cells have a watery filling inside of it that everything else is sitting in, which was our cytoplasm. All cells had a type of DNA. It can be circular, like in the bacteria, or linear, like in our eukaryotic cells. So they all had DNA. And the last thing that they all had were ribosomes, which help to build proteins. And remember, proteins perform all the functions inside of the cell. So continuing on, we're going to talk about some more cell organelles, or more cell parts. Cell organelles are parts that have a unique structure and a unique function. There are four that all cells share, which are the four that we just talked about there, and up to 9 that are found in plant and animal cells. So we're mainly going to focus on the plant and animal eukaryotic cells and the differences between those. Now, prokaryotic cell organelles, in addition to the 4 common organelles, prokaryotes also have what are known as plasmids. So they have DNA, okay? They have a big bacterial DNA, but they can also have these little plasmids, these little circular DNA. So you will need to know that about our prokaryotic cells. Some bacteria also have a structure called the cell wall. And this is a structure outside of the cell membrane to help protect the cell, okay? So here what we have are some differences or some special characteristics of our prokaryotic cells. Besides that, prokaryotic cells won't have any other organelles. All they have is the cell membrane, cytoplasm, DNA, ribosomes. A lot of times they'll have plasmids, and sometimes they'll have the cell wall. Not always. So our eukaryotic cells are really the ones that we're going to focus in on because they have so many parts to them and so many organelles. And this really allows them to be a lot more specialized. So our eukaryotic cell organelles, in addition to having the 4 common organelles, cell membrane, cytoplasm, DNA, ribosomes, they also have the following 6 organelles. So here, these are 6 organelles that all eukaryotic cells have. And then we'll talk about the differences between the plants and the animals. But the first thing that they all have is that nucleus, which is the region of the eukaryotic cell where the DNA is contained by a membrane. The main thing you'll notice here is that organelles all contain or are all made up of some sort of membrane. They're a separately enclosed structure. So imagine how our organs all have a different little structure or a little division or separation to them. Same thing with the organelles, tiny organs. Then we have what's known as the lysosome. This is a membrane containing digestive enzymes. Remember that enzymes are types of proteins. They speed up chemical reactions. So proteins that speed up reactions to digest waste and cellular structures. So the lysosome is like the cleanup crew of your organelle or of your cell. It's going to clean up and recycle things, get rid of waste. One interesting thing to know is that while you're in development, while you're still inside of the uterus, inside of your mom's uterus, that your little fingers are actually kind of webbed together, and that there are specific lysosomes that will actually come and break down that kind of tissue that's forming around there, or that membrane that's forming between your fingers, and will actually break that apart to separate your fingers. So if you're looking at this picture of our cell organelle, you might want to point out to yourself that this big structure right here, represents our nucleus, okay? And you might want to write that on the picture. And for the lysosomes, a lot of times the lysosomes are just going to be these little circular structures. And it's kind of hard to tell sometimes what the difference between them are, because there's other structures in there that are very similar and circular as well. But normally you'll see it in different colors. The next structure that all eukaryotic cells have, plants and animals, is the ER, or endoplasmic reticulum. This is a membrane that changes proteins, it detoxifies alcohol, and it's involved in communication. So it can work on or modify a protein. Remember that proteins have a specific shape. It can kind of change or work on that protein a little more to allow it to do a different job. Detoxifies alcohol. A lot of times, a lot of these ERs are going to be found in the cells of your liver, which is the organ that helps break down alcohol and toxins in your body. And it's also involved in communication because it's going to shift those proteins around, potentially as hormones, to communicate with other parts of your cells or other cells completely. Then you have your Golgi body, sometimes also known as a Golgi complex. And this is a membrane, again, notice that they're all membranes, to package proteins for release from a cell. So sometimes what you'll have is this ER right here. I'm sorry, the ER is actually right here. The ER looks like these separate stacks that are, I'm sorry. This is your ER. The ER, if you notice, has little connections between it. And your Golgi body or Golgi complex is going to be those separate stacks like pancakes that are on top of each other. So on the top of this cell, there's your Golgi. Here you have an ER. The ER is actually two different types. So here the ER has no little dots on it, and that's actually going to be considered your smooth ER. Your smooth ER. And then on the other side, you have this ER right here. Again, notice that they're connected to each other. Those folds of those membrane are connected. This is also your ER, but it's actually going to be considered rough because it has these dots that you can see on it. And those dots actually are ribosomes. Remember that part of the ER is to change those proteins. So you have ribosomes there that are making the proteins. Then they can be changed by the rough ER. And then they can be shipped to the Golgi to shift it around even more. The next structure that all eukaryotic cells have is a vacuole. It's a membrane that creates a storage space for food, water, or waste. The vacuole in a plant will be really, really big to store a lot of extra water. In animal cells, it's going to be a lot smaller. And so here you can see these kind of circular structures here. That would represent our vacuole. Then the last structure that we have on this page, or the sixth structure that all eukaryotic cells have, is the mitochondria. The mitochondria, sometimes known as mitochondrion, okay, is a series of folded membranes where carbs are broken down for energy. Hopefully that sounds familiar to you. Carbs are broken down for energy. This process, if you'll remember, and I'm going to write it up top so you can see it a little better. For the mitochondria, I would include that this is where respiration occurs. Respiration occurs to make, and we're talking about making energy, breaking down those sugars, those carbs, into energy. And that energy is, remember, known as ATP. Okay? So respiration occurs in the mitochondria to make ATP. And hopefully you'll write it down right beside it or to the left-hand side of your page. The picture that you have in your notes is of the mitochondria. I don't have it here. You do bigger scale picture of this, but the mitochondria is right here. Notice it has those folds inside of it, okay? Beside that picture, make sure that you label it or circle that it's the mitochondria. It says mitochondria inner structure. And these folds increase, I'm going to draw an arrow, work, okay? They actually increase surface area, which allows them to do their job more, which means that they can make more energy, make more ATP. Now, organelles are going to interact with each other to carry out cell functions. Remember that cells want to maintain homeostasis, which is that constant internal conditions, this right temperature, the right amount of water, the right pH, so that all your cells and all your enzymes are kind of happy and are working well, working to their optimum. So an example here is that in the nucleus, the DNA is going to code for ribosomes to build proteins. So here's your nucleus. You have DNA inside of there. It's going to send the code out to our ribosomes. The ribosomes are going to build proteins. These proteins can then be used as hormones to be released by the cell. So here's the DNA. Sends information to the ribosome to make those proteins. It might be changed at the rough ER. But then it can be sent to the Golgi complex where it can be shipped out. And the Golgi can actually pinch off a little piece of its membrane, almost like a little package. This is like the UPS store, and it's putting it in a little box. And it can send the box outside the cell to release. And it could be like a hormone, like estrogen or testosterone, two hormones that you've probably heard a lot about. Now, organelles that are found only in plant cells, that's going to be our cellulose cell wall. So if you notice on the very outside here, this is the cell wall, the very exterior structure. And you might want to point that out to yourself. You have the cell wall first, and then you have the cell membrane inside of it. Remember, it's made of cellulose. Okay, that's a type of carbohydrate. And then the second organelle that only plants have is the chloroplast. And the chloroplast is the organelle that has stacks of membranes in it that helps to create food during photosynthesis. And so remember, plants have to be able to make their own food. That's one of their very unique characteristics. And you actually have a picture right here of that chloroplast. So make sure you label this picture as the chloroplast. Notice it has stacks in it, and those stacks also create space. So stacks increase workspace. Remember, the job of the chloroplast is to make food for the plant, so it's going to allow it to make more food. The last structure that we need to talk about is centrioles, and these are found only in animal cells. Only in animal cells. Just like how the chloroplasts were only in plants, centrioles only in animals. Now your centrioles are proteins that actually help animal cells survive. So we're going to talk about that when we talk about cell division and how they can separate and grow. And this is what a centriole looks like. And it's actually going to help pull DNA around, pull chromosomes around when the cell divides. Okay? In your summary box, write 2 sentences that summarizes this section. You can compare and contrast those prokaryotic cells to eukaryotic cells, or compare and contrast animal cells to plant cells. But make sure you write 2 sentences to summarize this unit or to choose the most important information.